Makes perfect sense and makes me feel a little bit better about the situation, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and like you said before, like, it's not a lack of willpower, like, it is very chemical. And the
Yeah.
idea, I think, that we're all gonna, as I always say, like, white knuckle it through is like standing at the bottom of Mount Everest naked and barefoot, and someone's like, "Why aren't you hiking?" Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepic, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm Jenn Trepic, your host, of course, always here. And my friend Kate is with me today. Kate, welcome to the podcast. Well, welcome on this side of the microphone, I should say.
Thank you so much. Long time listener, first time guest. Really excited.
Right. Awesome. I love it. So let's fill everybody in a little bit. So we actually met through Nandar, who, if you
Yes.
guys remember, is a meditation coach, and I interviewed her on the show. So the episode was called, it was like slow down, dot, dot, dot. Yeah, right. Because that was me when I met her. And I want to say that was like fall 2019-ish that we did that episode. And
Oh,
when we
yes.
met.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Right back when I first moved to New York. So it's been a little while now, which is great.
I know you picked a hell of a time to come to New York City.
Oh, didn't I just moved halfway around the world just to hit a global pandemic? It's been interesting times, but it's been grateful to have met people such as yourself when I first got here and developed a friendship through the last year and a half. It's been really good.
Totally. And I'm thrilled not just to know you, of course, but to also now have your most lovely voice on this podcast.
My wonderful Australian accent, just
Yes.
bringing the diversity and the flavor.
Right. I love it. So I told you today's topic a couple days ago. What were your thoughts when I first sent it to you that we were talking about cravings?
Oh, look, I was really excited to learn more about cravings because I think it's something that everybody has, like that little voice in your head that sometimes just goes, "Oh, I just really feel like this." Usually it's the bad food too, so I want to hear more about where that kind of comes from. But yeah, just kind of that idea that your body can really suddenly tell you what it wants, and you just can't lose that thought from your mind.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to dig into it. I love all of your questions are on my list. So we will get to those quickly for our members. What you're getting this week is a recipe for buffalo chickpea salad. So I actually wish they were called like buffalo chickpea lettuce wraps because I think that gives us a better idea of what they really are. But the flavors are just delicious. They hit the spot. And I think they're just great this time of year, like a lettuce wrap, and they're vegetarian, plant forward friendly. I don't know if that's a thing, but I'm making it a thing. And so this recipe, it checks so many boxes. You're going to love it. It'll be a new staple in the house, whether it's for a snack, an appetizer, dinner, whatever you want. This one wins. So if you're not already a member, but you're like, yeah, that does sound good, you got to join us. So all you have to do to become a member, super simple. Go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. For $10 a month, you get weekly recipes, a monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions. It's a bargain and really free when you take advantage of the discounts every single month and the live chats, of course. It's a simple, economical way to show yourself that your health is a priority. Plus, by being a member, you're supporting this podcast and this community so we can continue bringing you new episodes and experts every week. Okay, remember, go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or don't remember, click the show notes wherever you're listening right now. Click the show notes, click support now, enter your email, payment method, then subscribe. You're all set. And then you'll get this week's recipe for the buffalo chickpea salad slash lettuce wraps. Cool?
Sounds delicious, Jen.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna make them. So we're talking about cravings. And like you said, Kate, it's like that feeling when you just have to have something. And there's the ones where, you walk by someone cooking and you smell it, or you walk by a bakery, or then there's sort of that like, oh, I need something salty. Or you're eating chips and you're like, now I have to have something sweet, right? Those balancing flavors. And like you said, Kate, most people have them.
Oh, yes.
So, according to the studies, 90% of people have cravings.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
A lot of people. So, I guess the moral of that story, right, is like you are not alone, right? It's not, we don't all have the same cravings, but we all have cravings. So, some of us might crave sweet or salt or crunchy or, who knows? But it's interesting to me because I think it's like they all manifest differently, but the sources tend to be pretty similar. So, one of the questions people always ask is like, are they good or bad? Right? Like, does it say something about us or our health? And actually, Kate, you said it right before. It's like our body talking to us.
Yes, and I'd love to kind of know what it says about our health in terms of those specific cravings. Like, is it good
Yeah.
for the sugar or the salt?
Yeah. So the truth is, they're not inherently a bad thing. They're also not inherently a good thing. I think the good piece of it is that our body is communicating with us, right? And the challenge, I think, comes in when signals get crossed, when we're not totally sure what the craving is, or when we're trying to satisfy it and it feels like a snowball and one craving leads into the next. Or maybe if we feel like there is no satisfying a craving. You're nodding. You're like, yes.
I am. I know that feeling, especially the snowball feeling, where it just all compounds on one on top of the other. You feel like you've hit the mark, and then it just has not satisfied you. It has not filled the hole.
Yeah, and that whole experience is technically in the body a series of chemical reactions that cause an intense desire for a specific food. So, the parts of our brain that are responsible for memory, pleasure, reward, right, play a role in these chemical reactions that cause cravings. So, it's actually similar to some degree. We touched on it last week in our conversation with Victor. That it's this habitual in our brain sending these signals and, these chemical reactions in our system that are sort of very perpetual and habitual. And so our brain has millions of functions and different parts of the brain run various tests. Okay. So the hypothalamus plays a role in regulating our appetite, among many other things, but it plays a role in our appetite. It receives information from a variety of signals, which come from both inside the body and outside, right? Like in our environment. The internal signals generally come from the gut and nutrient needs. The external signals are like walking by a bakery or sitting next to somebody who's eating popcorn. You laugh because you know.
Oh, I do know.
So, I think one of the pieces is to really differentiate between hunger and craving.
Yeah, and that's something I'm so interested in as well too, where you kind of find that balance between am I hungry or am I just craving this? Like, does my body actually need this, or have I just walked past that really great smelling bakery or popcorn?
Right. So, hunger is generally often the internal signals. The I need, nutrients or that nudge that says, eat something, right? Cravings on the other side tend to be more external or habitual, and they're more focused in the brain versus the gut. So it's like that voice that's like, it's time for your afternoon coffee, or I had a meal. Now I need something sweet because that tells me the meal is over, right?
Yes, absolutely. And really understand those habits as well too, because you do have that moment where you're kind of like, all right, dinner's done. Now I need something sweet because if it's not dessert, I haven't finished my meal. So the night's not over.
Yeah, and cravings, right? Like we could think of it like cravings tend to be about something specific. Hunger is much more general,
That
right?
makes
I could eat a salad or I could eat salmon or I could eat just broccoli or I could eat, right? Like we're more things look good to us when we're actually hungry. What were you going
I was just going to say, yes, they do.
to
When you're
say?
anything goes.
Exactly. So I want to talk through a couple other things that cause cravings. So one of those is our genetics.
Ooh, I wouldn't have.
Yes. Yeah, and this is fascinating to me, and for anybody else who geeks out on this stuff, like, you're gonna love this. I'm gonna try to keep it, higher level science and not dig too deep. But so basically, if you crave bitter things, you may have a mutation of the it's TAS2R38 gene. So TAS2R38 gene. And it's indicating a sensitivity to PTC or bitter taste. And this has actually been associated for a long time with a genetic component that's like evolutionary or and like anthropological in its implications. Because if we think about it, right, like poisonous things tend to taste bitter. So being able to taste that and avoid the things, it's like an evolutionary advantage, right? But this gene located on chromosome 7 is linked to this trait in humans, and two mutations or two um polymorphisms, right, are basically indicating a greater ability to taste bitterness. And so this genotype often comes with a desire to eat salt to mask the bitter flavor of foods. So if you have these mutations, you might notice that you really crave salty foods, you really like salty foods, or you may have, you might be the one that always adds salt, or you're cooking and someone is like, "Whoa, this is salty," and you think it tastes fine, right? So, um you might eat more salt than somebody who has a different genotype who's not as sensitive to that bitter taste. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And especially too when you think about people who define themselves as either salty people or sweet people in terms of which end of the spectrum they fall on. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so let's tackle the sweet thing. Okay, so if you're one of those sweet people, the genes TAS1R2 and TAS1R3, so TAS1R2 and TAS1R3, are both tied to taste perception in humans. And scientists have located what we call a single nucleotide polymorphism, right, on this genome that is just upstream of the TAS1R3 gene that's correlated with the ability to taste sucrose. So people deficient in sucrose tasting may be subject to an increased sugar intake to satisfy that need for something sweet. There's another gene called SLC2A2 that's been associated with higher levels of sugar intake, possibly because of the way the brain senses the glucose intake. So, this genetic profile may indicate a tendency to seek out and overeat sweets. So, this person might want to keep sweets, out of reach or limit yourself when you allow yourself that sweet snack because sugar and carbohydrate cravings can often occur as a result of an underlying issue, right? So, potentially blood sugar disorders or candida or food allergies. So, definitely work with your healthcare provider, right? But I think it's fascinating to realize that some of these cravings and flavors can be connected to our genes.
I think it's amazing. And I think it's nice to know that maybe it's not just me and my poor willpower that can't stop at half a bag of M&Ms and just leave it in the cupboard. So maybe I sit on that side of the line.
Right. Right, and I'm gonna come back to those M&Ms in a second, but I just wanna point out as we're talking about genes, and I've mentioned this before, but our genetics are not our destiny, right? Like, this is an extreme analogy, but I'm gonna say it because it's coming to my mind in this moment, but it's sort of like genetics hands you the gun, but lifestyle loads it.
Mm,
Or maybe it's like genetics hands you the gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger or something, whatever this analogy is. But it's like our lifestyle is actually what determines how our genes play out. And that's what we call epigenetics, or what we surround the genes in, what we bathe our genes in is our lifestyle. And then there's something called nutrigenomics, which is the study of the interplay between nutrition and genetics. So the whole thing is you might notice these things. Your genes are not your destiny. We can absolutely do things. You might notice that, like, if you have greater levels of activity, you're not craving the sweet things, or maybe vice versa, or whatever, right? So, things with our lifestyle can help. So, actually, I am connecting these dots right now in my head. So, if I eat too much garlic, I crave sweets. And I actually just talked to a
mm.
client. She has the same thing. So, that to me, the garlic is almost like the bitter thing, right? So I'm
Yeah.
probably really sensitive to the bitter, although I'm not a big salt person. So I don't know, but it's like there's definitely a connection here. But knowing that also helps me sort of make the choices around my nutrition to avoid some of these situations that feel like it's going to require all the willpower.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost great to know kind of what's behind you so then you can change your attitudes and your behaviors around it. It's very helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about your M&Ms for a second.
Yes,
So
please.
so this is sort of like eating processed foods, right? So eating processed foods can increase our cravings. So sugar and processed foods stimulate our appetite because we're eating, our body thinks it's getting proper fuel, like macronutrients and micronutrients, but then it doesn't get it. And the body continues to send the I need fuel signal, right? Because in its infinite wisdom, it doesn't know the next time that fuel will come. So it signals to us that it wants that fast fuel, the fuel it can use quickly. And you, as an avid listener of the show, right, you know that sugar and high glycemic carbohydrates, aka M&Ms, right, these foods give us that fast fuel, and those foods and the processed foods target the reward centers of our brain that keep us coming back for more. Kind of crazy.
Yep. And it definitely works on the reward center of my brain, I can tell you.
Right. So, getting technical for a hot second, processed foods contain this chemical or these types of chemicals called exorphins. And these exorphins bind to the opioid receptors in the nervous system. So that's why I always say it's chemical that you can't have just one. Highly processed foods can be incredibly addictive.
Mm. Makes perfect sense and makes me feel a little bit better about the situation, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and like you said before, like, it's not a lack of willpower, like, it is very chemical. And the
Yeah.
idea, I think, that we're all gonna, as I always say, like, white knuckle it through is like standing at the bottom of Mount Everest, naked and barefoot, and someone's like, "Why aren't you hiking?" You know? And you're like, "What?" Right?
Yes.
I mean, not that any of us have ever been in that situation, but I imagine that that's what it might feel like.
I can also imagine. It's a good analogy. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. So let's talk about hormones as another potential source of cravings. So, our whole body is actually controlled by hormones, right? We've talked about it before, hunger and satiety, right? Those are the ghrelin and leptin. Fat storage is associated with these hormones and insulin. Our mood is associated with hormones, right? Go back to our good food equals good mood episode. And we can think about cravings when we think about the hormones dopamine and serotonin. So, dopamine is our reward neurotransmitter. Dopamine is involved in movement and memory, pleasure and reward, sleep and mood, right? Just to name a few of the things that dopamine does. So, when dopamine is low, we want rewards, and that can increase food cravings and addictive behavior.
Yes. Makes a lot of sense.
It's like, oh my God, I'm checking all the boxes, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I've got the cravings thing down pat.
Yeah, don't worry. We're going to get to solutions, I promise.
Excellent.
So then serotonin, we hear a lot about it because it's connected to mood and appetite and digestion and sleep and memory and sexual desire. So often when we're cranky, irritable, feeling a little low or depressed, maybe, right? These can be caused by low levels of serotonin. And these feelings often create food cravings. Sugar and high glycemic carbohydrates support the release of serotonin, which is why they help us feel better for a little bit when we eat them. But, right, we eat them, we feel better for a hot second, then we crash as the serotonin drops again, and we have this vicious cycle. Other interesting fact, you were going to say something. I saw it in your face.
I was, and it was only really just in regards to, every romantic comedy or TV show which ends in a breakup of some sort and someone sitting on the couch with a tub of ice cream. Like it makes perfect sense then, that cycle of craving and dopamine and reward.
Exactly. And here's the other crazy thing about serotonin: 80 to 90% of the body's serotonin is actually produced in the gut,
Ah, I did not know that.
right? So I think it's also worth mentioning that for those who have food cravings around like your menstrual cycle, like
That was
that's
another big
chemical
question
too.
of mine. Yep.
Yep. And that's also hormones impacting our cravings. Like, yay, it happens to us all the time, right?
Yes, it does. Yes, there are very particular times in a month where those cravings really hit.
Right. And then there's two sources or causes of cravings here that I want to talk about that we've talked about in other episodes, but I think they're worth, mentioning here. One is sleep. So, like I said, we had an episode called Sleep on It where we get into the nitty-gritty of sleep, but for now, right, and its connection to cravings, the important thing to understand is that sleep is repair. Sleep is restoring the body. And without proper sleep, and by the way, proper sleep is both the quality and the quantity of the sleep, it causes hormonal imbalance, specifically leptin and ghrelin, right? Those hormones that tell us when we're full, right? So, leptin that tells us when we're full is made by our fat cells and is suppressed by a lack of sleep, which means we feel hungrier and constantly needing to fuel for energy, right? So we're rarely satisfied when we're sleep deprived.
Of course. Yeah. See, all of these things are just coming together because I know tired and cranky, I also develop a lot of these cravings as well. So yeah, it's really making a lot of sense for me.
Yeah. That's good though, because I always think understanding why, like really why, puts us in a place to be better equipped to actually do the things that help it.
Absolutely. And not just a case of avoiding the grocery store or the bakery when you are cranky and tired.
Right. So, interesting study that's worth mentioning. So, there was a study of over 1,000 people that showed that too little sleep reduced leptin, the hormone that tells us when we're satisfied, and increased ghrelin, the hormone that tells us when we're hungry, which resulted in overeating and additional weight gain. The research showed us that missing even one night of sleep can disrupt the body, causing cravings for quick energy, which it knows comes from processed foods and high glycemic foods, therefore exacerbating all of the things that we had just talked about before,
Oh, wow. Yep.
right?
Oh, yeah.
It all fits together. And then that brings us to stress, right? And this is like, duh, you know, like we
Yes.
know emotional eating.
I know. I think there's been a lot of that over the last 12 odd months.
Seriously. And the thing with this is like, I think sometimes it's so habitual that we don't even realize what's happening. Like we feel stressed, sad, mad, glad, whatever, whatever the emotion. We eat something to make us feel better, which lasts for mere moments. And then it's like we're conscious again and thinking, oh my God, why did I do that? Right. And for some of us, that leads to guilt, which we talked about on another nutrition nugget. So you can go back to
Mhm.
that. Right. But guilt and negative emotions, which then cause us to go through this whole cycle again.
Yep. It's really just continually perpetuating that cycle.
Right. And, like we said, like it's the serotonin. So we experience the calming benefit. And then we're having the sugar and the processed foods. So, like, your cravings when you're stressed are chemical. The cravings when you're happy are also sort of chemical, right? Not to mention that we have these cultural influences and environmental influences of, food is love, right?
Yes, it
Joy,
is.
celebration is food too, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's about sharing it. It's about group love. It's just about how good a donut can make you feel.
Exactly. Funny, I was just interviewed in another podcast the other day, and they were talking about, one of the hosts of that show was like, I have to confess, I ate donuts for breakfast. And you can imagine where the rest of the conversation went. So that'll air
Yes.
soon. I'll keep you guys posted on that one.
Brilliant.
So, what can we do to help these cravings? I've got you covered. That's coming up right after a quick message from our partner for this episode, DNA Miracles. Because every child is a miracle. DNA Miracles provides the highest quality body and wellness products designed for babies, children, and expectant mothers. All products are gentle, easy to use, and 100% effective when used as directed. DNA Miracles partnered with leading health professionals and scientists who follow the highest standards in ingredient selection to create the most effective skin, hair, and health solutions. As natural as possible, DNA Miracles is the best and safest solution on the market for you and your little miracle. From expert pediatricians to real family testimonials, everyone has fallen in love with DNA Miracles. So today we're talking about all things that cause cravings, right? And our kids experience all of this too, right? They're not exempt, which means that supporting them and their health each day is incredibly important, and especially their brain development. So you may want to check out the DNA Miracles Kids Omega 3. So, according to the American Dietetic Association, 90% of children do not receive adequate amounts of the nutrients they need through their food choices. So, the DNA Miracles Essential Omega 3 gives 800 milligrams of DHA and EPA, much more than any other omega 3 product for kids. And these are the ideal amounts of EPA and DHA to support your child's brain health and immune function. Plus, there's no unpleasant fishy taste. It actually, they call it this like fruit flavored emulsion. It is a creamsicle in a liquid form that is so delicious. Like, I would probably have the whole bottle when craving something sweet. So, absolutely delicious. You might need to hide it from your kids, but it's so good and it doesn't have any of the artificial colors, flavors, or sweeteners in it. So, win all around. More of what the children need, less of what they don't. And of course, as a salad with a side of fries listener, you get 10% off. So, text the word miracles, MIRACLES, to 844-947-4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, simply text the word miracles to 844-947-4846. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. All right, let's tackle what we can do to help all of this conundrum of cravings.
Yes, please.
Because it is. I just made that up, but I think it's real. It's a conundrum of cravings. Or a
Yeah, I like it. I like
conundrum
the alliteration.
causing conundrum causing the cravings, whatever, I don't know.
That works. Yeah.
It's gonna be a thing. Wait for it, right? So, remember, right, when we were talking about genetics, it's all about lifestyle, right? We're creating the bath that's surrounding our genes. And we just talked about these things that cause cravings. So, do you know what my number 1 is to avoid cravings?
Oh, please tell me.
Avoid processed foods,
It's a
right?
hot. Yep.
It's why make it more difficult on ourselves, right? Those exorphins that are, connecting to the opioid receptors, like, hello, no wonder why it's a problem, right? So if we can avoid those things, we make it a whole lot easier on ourselves.
Excellent. Is that where a lot of those things kind of come in? And I don't know how much of kind of the old rumor it is, but you're craving potato chips, so have a baked potato instead. So trying to actually target what the craving for a particular item is and transferring it into that more healthy option.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily going to hit the same because it's part of those what we're looking for, those chemicals. I think it can hit the flavor, and I talk about doing something like that when we're in that habitual sense of maybe we always eat something after dinner. So the first step in the process of changing that habit, changing that behavior would be it's much harder to try to go from always every night to don't have it, right? So the step in the
Absolutely.
middle, yeah, so like the step in the middle is okay, don't not have it, but shift what you're having to be something that's actually giving you nutrition. So that would be like the baked potato versus the potato chips.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Easier to shift than it is to just stop.
Yeah, and then it's a progression, right? Then maybe it's okay, so now you're having the baked potato and then it's like, I don't know, maybe sometimes I don't need it on some days. And then other days it's like, nope, need the baked potato. And then maybe on another day it's like, maybe I'll have extra vegetables instead of the potato. Or right? It's this evolution rather than trying to go from A to Z by flipping a switch.
Absolutely. I think that's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so number 2, stay hydrated. So often seems disconnected, right? But we can really conflate hunger and thirst signals. So I always, I've mentioned this before, 8 and wait, right? Drink 8 ounces of water, wait a few minutes and see how you feel. And then you can also go back to that test that we gave before of saying, is the only thing that sounds good the M&Ms or the potato chips or the cookie dough or whatever? If that's the only thing that tastes, that sounds good, we're probably not really hungry. But if you would eat broccoli or baby carrots or, something else, and everything you think of kind of sounds good, then you're more likely to be hungry.
Yeah. I think that's a great tip. It's a good question to ask yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Number 3, again, going back to what we talked about before, focus on sleep. Improving the quality and the quantity of our sleep can give us tremendous benefits for the cravings without having to feel like we're all willpower to get through a day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Good sleep. Top tip.
Yeah, and it can be a whole lot easier. So, you've been to my webinars, you probably heard me tell this story. I have an alarm on my phone that goes off every night at 10:30 that says, "Stop what you're doing and get ready for bed."
Yes. And I love it's actually a tip that I've developed for myself as well too.
Yay! So, like, it's a lot easier to pay attention to that alarm and start to shut my things down and go to bed earlier than it is every day at 3 o'clock to be like, don't eat sugar, don't eat sugar, don't eat sugar, right? Like, again, it's almost like I call it also like take the easy way out. Like we don't have to make it harder on ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. I think any times we can take the easy way out, it's better, especially with something like cravings.
Yeah. So then that also brings us to my number four, helping resolve cravings or helping, support cravings, or the lack of cravings, I should say, is incorporate exercise, right? So this helps with sleep. It also helps with stress management. So maybe you've heard me say before that the term workout came from working the stress out of our body. So
Yes.
again, like, yeah. So a lot theoretically better for our body to get the feel good hormones going from the exercise rather than the feel good hormones going for a hot second from the sugary foods, right?
Absolutely. It's a much better way for the endorphins.
Okay, number five, eat for nutrition. So, giving your body nutrients, right, can help mitigate the cravings that we experience because it's our body looking for nutrition, right? Then instead of feeling like we're at the bottom of Mount Everest again, right? When we eat for nutrition and we're giving our body what it needs, maybe the amount of time we have cravings is dramatically different, you know? And then instead of standing at the bottom of Mount Everest naked and barefoot, you're standing at the bottom of a ski hill in Vermont with boots, skis, poles, a jacket, and a chairlift, right? And
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I got this.
Much easier way to conquer it for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Number six, we talked about before. At first, choose different foods, right? So when the temptation arises, like maybe this week or this month, you focus on just eating whole, natural food instead of processed ones. And then when you're ready, right, you can go to the next thing.
Yes. Yes, I like that idea of switching up the foods. Easy substitutions, I think, is key.
And then your next thing is this next tip, which is number seven. So make a list on a post it of things that you enjoy. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? This seems stupid. Trust me. So we're going to put things that we enjoy doing on a post it note. And then I want you to make multiple copies of this post it note. Okay. Put one on your coffee table, one on your pantry, right? One
Yeah.
wherever you're sitting when you then go, I feel like eating something, right? Maybe it's boredom, maybe it's habit, like watching TV, right? The idea is for the list to remind you of other things that you enjoy doing. So, some ideas, throw it out there. Reading, listening to a podcast, wink, wink. Uh, go for a walk, color, right? I have an
Yeah.
adult coloring book sitting under my coffee table with the crayons right there or colored pencils, whatever they are, right there. And so the idea is that it helps us avoid the boredom. It can give us that hit of dopamine that we're looking for, right? That can help us resist temptation or those old habits. And the thing about the Post-it is that we're going to run into it when we're in that moment. Because when we're in that moment, it is infinitely more difficult to try to think of things we enjoy, right? Like, again, take
Absolutely.
the easy way out, put the Post-it on the table.
Yeah. I really like that. I think that's one that I'm definitely going to try.
What are you going to put on your Post-it?
I'm going to put yoga on there. I'm going to put reading on there. I'm going to put going for a walk on there. I will definitely put listening to a podcast on there. And I think just a general Netflix show if I can grab one for a spare 20 minutes.
Awesome. I think that's like the Australian in you that you can say, watch the Netflix show for 20 minutes instead of eating. Cause I feel like all of the Americans are like, no, I eat while I watch the Netflix show.
No, the Netflix show keeps me thinking and off food.
Okay, got it. I'm gonna have to practice that.
I'll
Okay,
help you.
perfect. Thank you. Okay, number 8. When you notice that you want something because someone else is having it, right? A different kind of temptation. Ask yourself if you really need it, why you think you want it, and if you're going to have it, how much do you actually need? Right? So this might be a perfect moment for the 3-bite rule, which we've talked about before.
Yes. Yep.
Right? So like I'm clearly interested in this just because the person next to me is having it. I'm going to have 3 bites and then I'm over it. Right? Okay, number 9, add breathing exercise, meditation, or journaling to help you manage your stress.
Also, really good tips and things that I do as well. They are great to manage the stress in the day. Getting up and starting with journaling, finishing with gratitudes, doing some
Yeah.
meditation in the middle really all does help with the stress.
And it could also be that you add that to the Post-it. So let's say the craving comes up, you're like, "Oh, I really feel like eating popcorn while I watch this show." Right? Pause for a hot second, grab a piece of paper, doesn't have to be a formal journal, like grab a piece of paper and something to write with and just start writing. You don't even have to know what you're going to write. Like this used to stop me from journaling. And so I started just on my literally writing, not really sure what I'm going to write about, but I'm sitting here writing in this on this piece of paper and we'll just see what comes up. So I started writing because I was feeling like eating popcorn, but I wonder really why I was feeling, right? Like stream of consciousness doesn't matter. Just start writing.
Absolutely. And I think that's what can be such a barrier sometimes for journaling is you feel like you have to have a specific moment and a specific point. But like you said, you really just pick up whatever is around and just stream of conscious. And it does, it distracts you. It takes the moment. And you'll always find something to write about.
And I think you'll be surprised too, like what comes out. Like you might all of a sudden have a lot of clarity around why you crave certain foods. You never know. Or what is causing you such stress in your day.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I think it does provide a lot of clarity.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And then number 10, get support.
Nice. Always a good one that you don't have to do it on your own.
Exactly. Like I think doing it alone is infinitely harder. And,
Absolutely.
listen, truth be told, like community and family can certainly be part of the stress stuff. But certain friends, a health coach, right? Other people who can help you identify the patterns and the triggers so you can interrupt the biochemical feedback loop, right? Going back to some of the signs where we started, like neuroplasticity and the ability for us to change our brain is amazing. But what it takes us doing is interrupting those patterns. And that is really difficult to do on our own. Identifying the patterns and the triggers is difficult to do on our own. So look for the support on that front. And support also helps us to learn like from each moment. So like it's not always being perfect or never having cravings or never giving into the cravings that we have. Right? Remember, 90% of people have cravings.
I think it's an important stat to remember so that you don't beat yourself up every time you have a craving.
Exactly. So what all of this stuff is really about is reclaiming control so that you are in charge of your health instead of these chemicals driving your decisions.
Yes, can reclaim control.
And not with willpower, not with the white
Not
knuckles.
with willpower, not with white knuckles, with support, with tools.
Exactly. And supporting, I think a big piece of this too is like supporting everything from the chemical side also, instead of having to fight the chemicals, work with the chemicals.
Yes, I think that's a really important point to remember as well.
So that's the rundown on cravings. So, what they actually are, what causes them, and 10 things you can do to help mitigate them. Kate, any questions?
I'm so excited to start implementing these 10 things. I can tell you what, the packets of M&Ms are going to stop going into the shopping cart. I almost said shopping trolley, which also brings out the Australian in me, but here it's a cart. Uh, yeah, so they'll stop going into the cart quite so frequently, I think now. I think I can build off on this.
Awesome. And that's the thing too, like you were saying, like you don't have to do all 10. Start with
Yeah,
one or
pick the
two.
ones that work. Yeah,
Yeah, and start with one or two and then build on it. Right? I think it's like I think it's like a diet mentality to say, okay, here are 10 things and I got to do all 10 things. And I feel like that's really it just setting ourselves up. So pick one or two, master those, and then add the next one.
absolutely. And I think it's the key, kind of what you were saying just then, is don't set yourself up for failure, set yourself up for success. So do the things that seem easy to you and will work for you and that you can easily incorporate into your routine. And that means that you will have a little bit of a win over the chemicals.
Exactly. Awesome. So, Kate, it's time for our nutrition nugget. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I always love the nutrition nugget at the end of every podcast. Excited to hear what
Yay.
today's is.
So, this week we're talking about bone broth.
Oh, I'm really interested by this because it seems to have become quite a big thing these days.
Exactly. And it's like over the last few years, I feel like everybody at some point has talked about bone broth or seen it somewhere. And it's like, I feel like that's something I should be having. Right. So, anyone in your life ever make you chicken soup at any point to like help you feel better?
Absolutely. Yep. From
Does it
scratch we can, but yes, 100%. It
and it works.
really does.
Okay, so think of bone broth like chicken soup on steroids.
Okay.
Okay, so bone broth is actually made from basically boiling animal bones and connective tissue. It's incredibly nutrient dense. We'll talk through some of that stuff in a second. And it's used in soups, sauces, right? You could just drink it as it is. And it's grown in popularity, but it's really not new. Like, this really was caveman hunter gatherer wisdom to make use of the inedible parts of the animals.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, why do we call it chicken soup on steroids? So, first of all, it's incredibly satisfying. And people will tout that it's great because it's satisfying and low in calories. But, I'm not a calorie counter. I don't think you need to be a calorie counter. And frankly, like, that's the least of the benefits of bone broth. Okay. So, let's talk vitamins and minerals and what those do for different parts of our body. So, the animal bones that are used to make the bone broth give us calcium, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, and some other minerals, which then help our bones. It's made If you have one that's made from fish bones, you can get iodine, which supports healthy thyroid function and our metabolism. Connective tissue used to make the bone broth, gives us glucosamine and chondroitin, right? The natural compounds found in cartilage, which you've probably heard of for joint support, right?
Yes,
So if
absolutely.
the bone broth is giving us those things, then it can be supportive for our joints. And if it's made from marrow, which a lot of them also have marrow, we get vitamins A and K2, plus zinc, boron, manganese, and selenium, some omega 3s and 6s. And then collagen, which has also been a buzzword lately. And
Yes, that's a big one in the health food stores.
yeah, so I have a nutrition nugget all about collagen coming up. But for today, the piece to understand collagen is, collagen is a protein. And when it's cooked, it becomes like a gelatin. So your bone broth will be like jello when it's cold.
Yes, I've noticed that when I first buy it as well too. It's jello until you cook it. Yeah.
Exactly. So specifically, right, collagen also gives us an amino acid called glycine. Studies show that glycine helps promote sleep. So it can help us fall asleep, stay asleep, and sleep deeper. Full circle on our cravings conversation, right? One study found that taking 3 grams of glycine before bed significantly improved the quality of sleep in individuals who have difficulty sleeping. So, yes, please.
Yes, absolutely.
There's some evidence too that it can improve gut health. So, there was a study on rats that gelatin helped protect and heal the mucosal lining of the digestive tract of rats.
Wow.
So, bone broth is also easy on the digestive system. Plus, right, there's an amino acid in gelatin called glutamine. Glutamine supports proper function of the intestinal wall. So, anyone who's experienced leaky gut, gut health issues, autoimmune issues, this might be really helpful. Okay, bone broth contains these amino acids called glycine and arginine. Both have strong anti inflammatory effects. So, think bone broth for inflammation. And this could look like pain in the body, allergies, asthma, um, arthritis, all things that start with A, right? But, inflammation is really the root cause of symptoms, illness, and disease. So this could be super helpful. There was a study on animals that gave oral arginine to mice that had asthma, and they saw reduced airway inflammation and improved asthma symptoms.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Right? P.S. Who knew mice had asthma?
Exactly.
Right.
And we it, but good to
Key
know what it
takeaway.
helped.
Right. So you could certainly make your own if you wanted to. You could Google till you're blue in the face and find a million recipes. I'm not that kind of person, and I don't wanna have to deal with those parts of the animal, like, I'm better not seeing and knowing. So know thyself, right? So if you're gonna buy a bone broth, things to keep in mind. Look for quality ingredients. So if they're not telling you where everything came from, be wary. And what's interesting about it is that every batch is different in its nutritional content.
I would never would have thought that.
And it's really because it's a direct function of the quality of the ingredients and how long they're boiled and at what temperature they're boiled or simmered and those kinds of things. So this is actually one where inexpensive may be a red flag, because if it's inexpensive because they're using inexpensive ingredients, we're probably not getting everything we're looking for from those. I'm trying to think of the word other than ingredients, like from those like starting points,
Yes.
right? Another one is check the sodium content. Depending on your ailments, too much salt could exacerbate your symptoms. So, this thing that we're trying to do to help all those things, if it's highly processed or not as great of a quality or not as pure, or they're trying to add flavor with salt, we may not really be doing ourselves any favors. Look at the ingredients, right? See if they've added things to it. Veggies, ginger, turmeric, herbs, great. I love it. Coconut milk, I don't love, right? Other allergens or things in it, like we don't want to add allergens to our healing food. And when we're looking for the healing properties of the bone broth, we don't want to have these other things in it that are potentially removing those benefits. The other question that people ask me is like, how much and how often? So start with a cup, like 8 ounces a day, and then go from there. So you may then find yourself craving it. If you're craving it, have more. See how you feel. The other thing of this, and I talk about it when I talk about like antioxidants, right? So antioxidants also help inflammation. And with antioxidants, we talk about having like a loading dose. So think about like if you had a raging house fire,
Yeah.
or let me make this more personal. My toaster, I started a fire in my toaster, which turned into the toaster on fire. If I threw a thimble of water on that, I could easily say water doesn't put out fires,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
We
It's going
have to
down
have,
that direction.
yeah, we have to have enough, especially when, we sort of have excessive inflammation in the body. It's like a fire is burning and pouring a thimble of water on it probably isn't going to do it. So you might want to consider doing a loading dose of more in the beginning and then till your symptoms dissipate. And then you can scale back and see when symptoms return. And that would tell you what your ideal dosage is. But I will say, you know, if your concern is you're having too much bone broth, right? Or you feel like you need a little more, like if that's what we're craving, we're in a really good place. Right?
That's good to know. Yeah.
And then I would just say too, like give it time. Right? You might need to have it daily for 3 to 4 weeks before you notice a huge difference. Or some people might notice a difference in the first week, but just give it time and pay attention and see what happens. See what you notice. Um, One caveat, someone, who may not want to have bone broth is somebody who struggles with histamine intolerance. So drinking bone broth can actually make you feel worse, not better. So if you have excess glutamate, right? Again, be careful of additives. So synthetic glutamate is what we often refer to as MSG, right? Excessive glutamate can cause headaches, mood swings, hyperactivity, many other symptoms. So know yourself, read the ingredients, see how you feel. And then total plug, because I met the people behind Nikki's Liquid Gold. I love, love, love their bone broth. They ship it to you frozen in cubes. Each cube is 4 ounces. So you just 2 cubes. And that also helps me avoid like the gelatinous texture. And the flavor it tastes good, but it's also relatively mild. So it's not like a thing that you have to get used to, So check them out on Instagram. Go to their website, Nikki's Liquid Gold. It's Nikki. And of course, with whatever, be sure to read the label of the one that you find that you're eating. So go out there, enjoy that chicken soup on steroids because it certainly can't hurt. And there's tremendous potential upside.
Yeah. You've sold it to me, and it really is chicken soup on steroids.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing.
Any lingering questions on the bone broth?
I think I would just love any tips on how you actually serve it for yourself. Is it something that you do just drink like soup, or do you use it in your cooking?
So I just drink it. But if I do have um, some veggies that are already cooked, I'll sort of throw them in when I'm reheating. So everything's already cooked, but I'm sort of making a soup with it, if that makes sense. But I'm not like making soup from scratch with the bone broth.
Yeah. No, that sounds delicious.
So super simple. And like it can be a great snack, like just in a mug, especially if you crave that afternoon snack.
Oh gosh, yes. Something that can really hit the spot then.
Perfect. Well, Kate, once again, thank you for joining us today and welcome officially to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You're welcome back anytime. Your accent is the best part of this episode. So, as always, everybody, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram at Jenn Trepeck, JennTrepeck. That's really the handle on all the platforms. Consider this your invitation to send me a message. I love hearing from you, your takeaways, your ideas, your questions, all the things. Please let me know. It's also the easiest way to learn more about working with me directly. And I'm inviting you to level up your game by becoming a podcast member. Go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries or click the link in the show notes. Becoming a member shows your support for this podcast, this community, and above all, your health. So you'll get weekly recipes, monthly articles, tools. This week's recipe is for the buffalo chickpea salad, which is really more like buffalo chickpea lettuce wraps, but such a great spring meal or snack. Hits the spot when you get that craving. Ba-dum-tsh, right? Couldn't help myself. So until next week, remember, cravings aren't your willpower or lack thereof. Cravings are science. And believe me when I say, you've got this. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.